Tired of life, are you?
Hey, what is going on guys? Danny here, hope you've all been doing well. In this video, I'll be taking a look at Kingdom Come Deliverance for the PC and give you guys a performance overview of how it runs on my system, which has some high-level hardware. Kingdom Come Deliverance is a medieval RPG which has been anticipated by many fans for a few years now, including myself. A couple years ago, in fact, I made a video about this game where I played it in one of its early alpha stages, back when I used to use my Intel Core i5 6600K and AMD R9 390 in my personal rig. If you want to check that video out, I'll leave a link down below, but bottom line was that although the game looked great, performance was all over the place, there was a lot of stuttering, and you could tell there was a lot of work left to be done. Well, here we are 2 years later, with the game officially released, so we'll find out just how much things have improved. Now before we get into it, let me give you guys a quick rundown of my system specifications. For the CPU, we have an AMD Ryzen 7 1800X, which has been overclocked to 3.9 GHz, paired with 16 GB of G-Skill Trident Z memory clocked at 3333 MHz with a cast latency of 14. For the graphics card, I'm using an EVGA GeForce GTX 1080 Ti SC Black Edition, which has a plus 100 MHz overclock to the core and plus 250 MHz to the memory. For full system specifications, you guys can check the video description down below. For your convenience, I also have an active on-screen display, so you guys can see what is going on with the hardware as I'm playing through the game. Jumping into the game, and my opinion from the last time is still the same. This game visually looks phenomenal. The environment is definitely a work of art, where sometimes I'll stop in the middle of my travels to admire the scenery and appreciate the display. The forest environments in particular look the best in the game, with the area having a very realistic appeal to it, doused in dense trees, bushes, and grass, but riding through vast open fields and observing the environment from a distance is also a great experience by itself. The PC version also has exceptional lighting and shadow effects, thanks to the newer version of CryEngine, with different objects interacting dynamically with the shadow and lighting. Ambient occlusion was also implemented very well in the game, giving the land a great sense of depth, rather than a dull flat look. Draw distance is also appealing, but only when it works. I was noticing quite a bit of issues in regards to texture streaming and pop-ins, something they'll have to work on improving with further patches. Moving on, the game gives you an abundance of settings to play around with multiple levels of quality settings from low, medium, high, very high, and ultra high. So as you guys can see, I'm playing at Quad HD 2560x1440. In the advanced graphics settings menu, I'm using a mixture of settings here, with graphics options that would impact the most obvious visuals like texture, object quality, and shaders. I have set those to ultra high. Lighting and volumetric effect details are set to very high, with the rest of the settings on just high, with motion blur being turned off for obvious reasons. What I can say about the ultra high settings is that not even a system like mine with an overclocked GTX 1080 Ti can handle it at 1440p and deliver a 60 FPS experience. The way I play this game is not by maxing out every single graphical option or sliders, but rather I use a mixture of ultra high, very high, and high settings, because that is what I find to be a good compromise in visual quality for playable performance overall. One of the first areas I wanted to show you guys was Rattay. This was one of the biggest cities in the game, with lots of NPCs, buildings, and 2 castles. It's the most demanding section in the game. As you guys can see, riding into the city and the frame rate is fluctuating quite a lot. And there's a little bit of stuttering too. The marketplace with all the vendors is the most demanding area specifically. Here we can see the frame rate dip into the low to mid 40s for some brief moments, but for the most part stay around the low to mid 50s. As we move away from the specific area, the frame rate seems to be hovering around the 60 FPS mark. Then as soon as we exit out of the city, the frame rate jumps into the high 60s and low 70s. I was able to tolerate a fluctuating frame rate when dealing with the large cities, because there are only 2 in the game, and the only thing you do in those areas are talk to NPCs, buy stuff from vendors like weapons, armor, and food, and pick up some quests. We're not taking part in any combat here, so it's not really essential to have a very smooth experience. This isn't an issue with smaller towns though, such as Ledechko. Here you guys can see the frame rate stays around the 60 FPS mark overall, and you're not met with a fluctuating frame rate like we saw in Rattay. Taking a stroll through those beautiful forests, which I mentioned earlier, and the performance is still pretty smooth here. Here the frame rate tends to stay around the mid 60s. Encountering some NPCs like this bandit camp, hardly impacts any performance, and we're still at or close to that 60 FPS mark. Taking part in large-scale battles with these settings also isn't an issue. Despite lots of NPCs who are covered in plated armor, clashing their swords with each other, we're still able to attain a smooth experience and performance by staying around that 60 FPS mark without too many noticeable dips or variation in the frame rate. Riding through a vast open field provides us with the best results. Here we can see the frame rate hover around 70 to 80 FPS. When looking at what the hardware statistics are showing, I noticed that usually at any given moment, the game will keep 6 to 8 threads on the CPU around 50% utilization, with the GPU being the limiting factor at this resolution, of course. Throughout the entire playthrough, the GPU usage will show utilization between 90 to 100%. VRAM usage is around 4 to 5 gigabytes, so unless you have a GPU with 6 gigabytes or more, you'll run into issues at 1440p or higher resolutions, and you'll also have to make some compromises with the graphics options by lowering shadow quality and textures and draw distance. System memory is also around 8 gigabytes, half of my total system memory. You'll definitely need at least 16 gigabytes to ensure there's enough system memory for the game. What this tells us is that this game is taking advantage of available system resources. Core scaling seems to show that a quad core will probably not cut it, and you'll need at least a 6-thread CPU so you don't run into any issues or bottlenecks on the CPU side of things. This is a game I highly recommend you all check out if you're a fan of medieval-styled RPGs such as the Mount & Blade series. It doesn't have any fantasy aspects to it, and that's fine by me. Using a plain old-fashioned sword to slash through your enemies is so satisfying in this game, and is my preference for a combat style, actually. The mechanics do feel a little janky at first, but you get used to it with some practice. As for the story, it's quite interesting. There are a lot of interesting characters as well, along with some historical references some of you may enjoy. The game has room for improvement. There's quite a few bugs here and there, but if you are able to tolerate it and overlook some of those issues, it's really not deal-breaking in any way. It's a really fun game to play. I definitely recommend you guys check it out. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts and comments down below. And if you're interested in more content like this, then hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching guys, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.